Welcome to The Link Online. And once again, we're pleased to present to you news from Canada, about Canada, and Canadians' views on world situations. Hello, I'm Mark Montgomery, and with me today, a special guest. We have Stéphane Parent with us.
Hello, guys.
Who is the host and creator of the French version of The Link here at Radio Canada International. We have Vincenzo Morella with us as usual.
I'm still here.
So are we all. That's kind
join
of
the club.
Yeah.
That's kind of the motto. We're still here.
We're lucky.
In the control room we have with us today, we have Marc-André Deschamps, Pierre-Luc Blais, and the man we admire. He's like a father figure to us. He knows things. He helps us out. He has the pen that marks our time cards that gets us paid. So that's why we love him. Pierre Zutil in the control room as well today. And we also would like to say hello to our fellow stations. We have World Radio Paris, who tunes us in, and the shortwave service from Germany, and Cowrie 97.5 FM radio in Nigeria. Now, today on the program, we are going to talk about...
I'm talking about Kids Go Jeunesse and how they're launching a campaign to teach algorithms to children.
We're also going to be talking about police use of facial recognition. And Terry Haig was with us this week. He's not here for the show, so Stéphane has graciously been able to come in and fill in his place. And
I didn't decide anything. You decided that for me. When I walked in this morning, he says, I want you on the show. So I said, okay.
Well, I didn't put you in a headlock this time.
I'm always happy to be with you.
Although I did trip you. Stéphane.
Concerning Terry's story, he left us something today, and it's a project that's been in the cards for at least 2 years, if memory serves me right. It's about a beluga kind of section of the ocean off the coast of Nova Scotia, about 40 acres, or anyway, it's a big chunk of sea that would be kind of cornered. You wouldn't be able to escape it, and it's okay. We're not talking about human beings trying to escape it, but belugas that have been in trouble here in North America. They
haven't been in trouble. They've been in private aquariums and so on. So
not happy.
No, it's a sanctuary for whales.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, what a nice word! I should have thought of that.
It's a word we sometimes use in English.
Okay, that's fine.
In French, it would be
un sanctuaire, monsieur.
Sanctuaire. There you go. You see, it's close. It's close.
We invented the word, but we forgot about it.
You know what? You probably did. A lot of people don't realize this, but a vast number of words in English actually come from French because of the Norman invasion in 1066.
Yep.
Because the French were ruling England, and a lot of the words got adopted. For example, all the TION words, information, etc., and so forth. Those are French. And sea shanties. What is a shanty? Chanté. There you go. See, those kind of things. Anyway, the things you'll learn on this program, it's amazing. So those are some of the stories coming up on today's edition of The Link Online. Okay, let's start out with technology. We're going to be getting to technology again a little bit later, but of course more and more technology is changing society, and one of the more controversial ones is the idea of facial recognition. Now, this used to be the domain of the fantastic science fiction stories, but of course now it's quite common. It's with us now. And questions about surveillance and the use and potential misuse of this technology are certainly cropping up. And there, of course, people are sort of hinting at an Orwellian future as well, because, you've got these cameras looking at you and finding out what you're doing.
It's not only the cameras. Let's say there's a gangster next to me. The police find them. I end up on the picture. But it's what the police does or could do in putting those pictures aside into a magical bank which they could go to in the future to say, Mr. Montgomery, you were on such and such street that day 3 years ago. Why?
Well, exactly. That is one of the concerns about the potential misuse of this technology. And I spoke to Teresa Scassa. She is the Canada Research Chair in Information Law and Policy and a professor in the Faculty of Law at the University of Ottawa. And I asked her if she was surprised at the news that Canadian police were using this or experimenting with this technology.
I wasn't surprised, but certainly concerned. And I think this is a concern I've had for some time with a lot of new technologies and issues of transparency and oversight in their adoption by police in Canada.
What are the laws in Canada regarding use of this technology?
That's fairly complicated. Right now, there are a couple of investigations going on in Canada around privacy issues. And so there's one investigation into the private sector company itself to see whether it breached our private sector data protection laws. And then the Federal Privacy Commissioner has also launched an investigation into the RCMP's use of that technology. So there's certainly laws relating to privacy, but I think there are issues as well around transparency, oversight, accountability in the adoption of these kinds of technologies by police, and that's where it gets a little bit murkier in terms of legal obligations.
What kind of concerns do you have about this, though? Because people have said, well, if the police are only using this to capture bad guys, then I'm okay.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge mistake to make, and that's where the transparency and oversight issues come in. So I think there are really big privacy issues that are important here, and in terms of the transparency and oversight, in the first place, facial recognition technologies have been associated with false positives, which can be very disruptive and harmful to individuals. They've been associated with bias and discrimination. And so these are concerns about the technologies themselves. So if a police service is going to be adopting a technology, some kind of transparency, oversight, and accountability is important. Beyond that, there needs to be a public discussion about whether we want our police services to be using those technologies, and maybe the answer is yes, but there should still be that public discussion. So how is the technology going to be used? By whom is it to be used? What kind of authorization is required for its use? And what kind of audit trail is going to be there to be sure it's not misused? So you want policies and procedures in place to ensure that the rules for the use of the technology are clear, that they are auditable, and that there's some kind of oversight. So it seems to me that we're lacking all of that in Canada as these police services experiment with this technology without anyone really having been aware ahead of time that this was taking place.
As the thought, I mean, a lot of people have invoked the idea of an Orwellian future. Do you see any aspects of that in this technology and state use, police use of this?
Yeah, I think we should be really concerned about these technologies, and it may well be that there are important or useful applications. But as I said, transparency and oversight becomes so crucially important in that context. What are the limits of what's acceptable is a discussion that has to take place. And so these are things that we can't just let go of. And in part, that's what contributes to this Orwellian future, this idea that people just give up and have no say and stuff gets imposed. That's a real problem. Technology tends to seduce and entrance, right? And then it's only sort of after the fact that you start to think about what some of the consequences or implications might be of those technologies and how they're collecting data and what they're doing, and then you start to realize that there are problems or consequences. So I think technology can be very seductive, but we know what we need to do and we need to do it.
And that was Teresa Scassa, professor of law at the University of Ottawa. So she is a little bit concerned about the fact that this technology is being used, and a lot of people didn't know about it. The government agencies, the municipalities, and so on.
You know what's weird is that when you ask police, like Police of Montreal, are you using this? They don't want to tell you. You ask the RCMP, are you using this? They give you two different versions in 1 month. No, but yes. And against the pedophile, and that's what we are doing right now. And in Toronto, they're a little bit more open about it. But that's the weird thing. Why not come out in the open and say, yes, we are using them.
The RCMP were, in fact, criticized because they had been directly asked, and they said, no, we weren't. And then a month later, they said, well, yeah, some of us have been using it. So, Yeah. But again, the question is, is this, do we want this kind of thing? And as Teresa Scassa said, what are the rules for who gets to use it, who authorizes, what is it used for, when is it used, and so on and so forth. Because, as she said, now the claim of the company is we only deal with police agencies. But she said, well, that's not quite true because they've already been allowing campus police to use it. And campus police are not police agencies. These are private agencies. So, and does it go to security guards and, who can use this? And, and as she says, Clearview, which is the company that involved here, is not the only company that has this. And she says there's a market for this. And whenever there's a market for this type of technology, somebody's going to want to use it and somebody's going to want to sell it to them kind of thing. So it's a question, it's worth asking these questions. And if you have any questions about this or thoughts on this, drop us a line. You can, of course, put your thoughts in to the space below each story on the website. So you can put a public comment there and express your thoughts on this as well. Coming up, we're going to be taking a look at a whale sanctuary. And for this story, we've brought in our special guest, Stefan Perras, to fill in for Terry on this one.
Look, I've checked my data. Everything's good now. 40 hectares, okay, which is 80 acres approximately. Yeah. I know the difference because I own some forest in Quebec. So anyway, it's going to be a big chunk of sea off the coast of Nova Scotia. There is an organization that's been trying to work on this project for a while to bring some of the animals that are in captivity up to that sector, where they say there's sufficient nutrients for the whales to keep alive and be happy. The currents are not too bad. It's kind of warm. They were looking at different sites across Canada. They were actually in close consultation with population in 2 areas along that coast, and they got their preferred place where they really wanted to go. It's an experiment, but it's not the first time that we see this in the world. I think there's another somewhere in Europe, don't quote me, but there's another place like that. And then there was the infamous kind of cage that the Russians built a few years ago, where we saw one of the environmental groups go up and try to liberate those the whales that were in captivity. Horrible conditions then. Anyway, this is a good story, and it's Terry who spoke with Camille Labchuk, who is the Executive Director of Animal Justice, an Ottawa-based, my accent is terrible, Ottawa-based
doing fine,
organization. Sorry. There we go. We listen to that now.
There were dozens of people, many organizations pushing to ban whale and dolphin captivity for years, and it finally paid off, and now we're seeing the next step. So the great thing about Bill S-203, which passed last year outlawing captivity, is that it's now illegal to keep whales and dolphins in tanks in Canada, except the ones who were already in tanks had to be grandparented in because there's nowhere for them to go. So now we're seeing, finally, a solution to that problem. So the sanctuary, which plans to open up in Nova Scotia, is securing approvals, and it has community support and support from the government. It could be that missing link. It could be the home for whales formerly kept in tanks who now have a better life.
These whales were entertainers. I mean, it's like the old actor's home in a way. Tell me, as a whale ages and he still has to entertain, like human beings, that's pretty traumatic, right?
Well, their entire lives are one long traumatic incident. Sometimes whales are taken from the wild and then thrown into tanks. So the capture is extremely traumatic. The transport is horrific for them. Sometimes they're born in captivity, and then they're denied of even the ability to know what it was like in the wild. Those whales born in captivity have never been able to swim vast distances or dive deeply or hunt cooperatively like they do in the wild. So, there's a lot of trauma, and I think it's incumbent upon those of us who cause this trauma, our community, to try to rectify that.
So this is supposed to open. They're shooting to open it by the end of next year. They say there's room for 8 whales. There are over 360 whales, orcas and belugas in working aquariums right now. How close is the world? First of all, are all these 8 going to come from Canada? The 8 whales that are going off Nova Scotia?
It's hard to know where they will come from right now. I don't believe that there are any specific commitments as to the source of those whales. All we know is that they've got the space, so if the situation arises, they can accommodate them. But I think this one sanctuary is only a partial solution. I think this is a really great model, and I hope the model will be adopted elsewhere, and I hope the Whale Sanctuary Project continues to expand. I know they're looking for other sites for different species. This is what we do. This is the solution for whales who were kept in captivity for their entire lives and now need a new home.
So that was Camille Labchuk, the Executive Director of Animal Justice in Ottawa, interviewed by Terry this week.
Yeah, and as she said in that, there was a bill S-203 that was passed that said from now on you cannot have whales in captivity in Canada. And the idea is that there are still some in the aquariums in Canada, and I guess eventually they will be the ones that are going to this whale sanctuary off the coast where they can live a more normal life in the ocean, as she said, dive deep and hunt for real food, and because I imagine for a whale in an aquarium, it's a pretty bizarre life. It's like a giant jail cell in a way, but they're used to sonar detection of food and each other and so on and so forth.
Yeah, we don't have any clue on what we're doing to these animals.
No.
And that's to a lot of animals. So, we got some big explaining to do at one point. Yeah.
You got some explaining to do.
Yeah, sir.
Right. So again, if you have any thoughts on this, drop us a line. And that Terry story, of course, like the other ones, is in the highlights section of the website. And you go down to the bottom of each story, and there's a space there where you can put in your thoughts and for the other people to look at and hear your thoughts on the subject. Coming up, we're going to go back to technology and look at teaching children about algorithms, which is kind of a mystery to me. Algorithms, that's one of those words that we use all the time, but I don't know what an algorithm is. Do you?
I sort of have an idea, and I explained this in the interview when I was interviewing the person I spoke to. I said, I kind of know what algorithms are, but can you explain it to me?
Well, because they run so many things nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is kind of run on an algorithm of some kind. So it's a little bit...
So why do children need to know anything about that?
So exactly, it's a very good question. So like the Kids Code Jeunesse and the Canadian Commission of UNESCO launched what they call an algorithm literacy project. And basically it's supposed to teach children on how algorithms affect the content they read and watch on the internet. So like Google, YouTube, so stuff like that. And basically they want them to also think critically about the media they read. So knowing if a certain website or certain content creator has like an objective behind behind their work. So earlier this week, I spoke to Juliette Waters, who's the Chief Knowledge Officer of Kids Code Jeunesse.
So we decided to kind of join forces and really sort of start this campaign with a particular focus on, how do algorithms kind of construct the media experience that you have or that kids have, when they're going online, the kind of websites that they're shown, the kind of YouTube videos that are suggested to them. All of these things are more and more mediated by algorithms. So we recognize that a lot of the adults and teachers, parents around them don't necessarily understand how this works either. So there's this big knowledge gap that we've just really wanted people to start addressing and to be able to start talking about.
Just because you mentioned media literacy in regards to this, what exactly do you mean? Like, how does that factor in exactly?
Sorry, media literacy?
Yeah.
So by media literacy, what generally we're talking about, the way that it's taught in most curriculums, let's say in Canada, is this idea that the media that we read, is constructed, and so that we have to read things critically with that in mind, that, whatever it is that we're reading, that there's usually an objective behind it, not necessarily a bad one, but being able to develop kids' critical thinking around media.
Yeah. So basically, the project is supposed to spark interest in kids and teach them about the media they consume. And apparently, the second phase of this project is to launch this type of education across colleges and schools across Canada.
And there's a third phase. I heard they were closing down YouTube and Facebook.
Not gonna happen.
I don't think so.
Not gonna happen.
I don't think so.
But see, I guess this is how an algorithm works to some extent. Is when you start to search sites, it records what you're doing somehow, and then it automatically says, "Oh, Joe Blow likes this, so here's a site over there." Yeah. When he does the next search, we'll throw this site on his search, and so on and so forth. And
I'm only getting CBC stuff. I don't know why.
Well, what's interesting is if you have a Google account, there's a way to check the data they have on you, and there's a way to check, like, it tells you what you like based on what you've searched and stuff like that. And
where do you go for that?
I don't know exactly, but I know it, and if your account settings, you could check that out.
Okay, account settings.
Yeah.
Oh, it sounds interesting. I'm going to be checking that.
Sounds complicated. I have trouble with my computer at work. Huh?
Yeah, I know.
But the whole thing is, again, this. We were having this little debate here just when this clip was playing about the fact that people tend not to look for other opinions. They tend to look for opinions that reinforce what they already feel. And so they're always getting reinforcing information. So their positions tend to harden as opposed to being more open. And of course, the trouble with algorithms, I suppose, is that they help in that reinforcement of kind of thing. So,
and we're all victim to that. We're victim of ourselves, and we're victimized by the technology that insists to bring us into certain directions because that's the way they sell the ads. Hey, I'm bringing Stefan. He loves Trump. He loves... I didn't say that. You know what I'm saying.
As an example.
As an example.
Really, as an example. But yeah, then they'll feed you adverts this way as well, because that's where they make a lot of money, I guess. All right, so Stefan, you tell us a bit about... No, you haven't been on the show, I think, only a couple of times.
That's it.
And that's we should
that's enough.
Apologize for that, because... But just tell us a little bit about your show, because, of course, you are the host of another show, which is the more or less equivalent, although it's much more entertaining.
Are you sure you got the time? Because you only got 9 minutes left on this program, so, I'm worried about this. My show has no time limit. Yeah. Either we can do 25 minutes if we want to, or we can do, the more we can do, actually, it's we don't lose a satellite, but at the change of the hour, there's another crew coming in to do another show. So we can do 45 minutes of show if we want to. Generally, we actually do lately 40 minutes, 45 minutes. We're very, very tight. And it's like a game show.
Which I have lost because I've appeared on your show.
So there's a game and show. You have to answer questions. But I think that I've always thought that you can learn stuff by having fun. And I've done this since I was 10 years old, and teachers didn't always appreciate where I was going with this. But yeah, you can have fun in our show, and you have a certain amount of balls that you will lose during the show. You start with 100 balls. En français, c'est plus drôle. On parle de boules. Anyway.
So we'll call them points.
Points.
You have 100 points.
So you'll lose them progressively more as the game goes on. And you can end up with 0. It doesn't matter, really. Nobody loses. You're all winners about finding the truth. We ask questions about the subject of the week.
Which is a news subject, right?
It's always news, It's like the technology subject you're doing. Don't tell anyone, but it's on one of these next shows.
Oh boy,
but we'll go more in depth, of course. Just joking with you. So yeah, we have lots of fun, and it's always, I love having different people coming to the show because they get to compete with each other, which in our job was basically our challenged by the computers. We'll spend a lot of time on it to make sure it works, and sometimes a little less talking to each other. And since it's broadcast on Friday, what better occasion than just forget about the week and all the frustrations with the bosses? No, I'm not. that as an example. Anyway, so we have a good time on that show, and we talk about everything.
And that is also on the RCI website, and it's also on the Facebook post.
And it's in a few minutes.
It's in a few minutes. So if you're on Facebook now and you want to see Stefan's show, stick around. He won't be in that chair. He'll be in this chair.
15 minutes past the hour. That's when we start.
Speaking of the hour. Speaking of the hour, this is an interesting thing about Canada because, of course, we are one of those rare countries in the world that has lots of time zones.
How many do we have, Mark?
5.
6.
Well, but it's a half one.
Yes, you're right. There's a half one.
Yes. 5.5. 5.5.
Yes, we'll allow. So, there's a time change coming in Canada. We've been talking about having no more time change for a while. We know l'Union Européenne has said that at 2021, there won't be any more across their region. I guess that excludes England now. Anyway, what the fun part is that we want to go in that same direction, or at least the people. I don't know about the governments and the industries, but the people have been consulted in Yukon and in British Columbia, and both groups have said 93%, yes, put an end to this because we lose an hour, we gain an hour, it's all confusing. And why? Because of old ideas that we would save energy if we changed the time at that particular time of year. People are getting, just let me sleep, okay? Don't confuse me. And that's a good idea. I say good because it seems to be a real trend, not only in Canada, but in the United States, the western states, California, Oregon, Washington, they all want the same thing, and so does BC. Yukon territory in Canada is the first one to officially say, we're done with it.
But isn't Saskatchewan already?
Yes, 1942. They said we'll never go into that idea that was being imposed by the federal government in 42. At that time, the province could opt out. Imagine the concept.
Wow.
So they did really quickly. So 1 million Canadian citizens don't have to do this change, plus a little section of BC. St. John, Fort St. John, it's a place I went to, but so many places I visited, I forget. Just joking. Anyway, so now Yukon, 35,000, 36,000 citizens will wake up at the same time on Sunday morning, no harm done. BC wanted to do it now. It probably, that's what the pundits are saying, probably will be the last change of time in BC. They just needed more time to coordinate with those Western American states, and together they will come and say, done with it. Quebec says, oh, it's a great idea, but hasn't done anything. Like sometimes they do. Politicians just say, yeah, good, but they don't do anything. They'll wait for an election and say, oh, by the way, we just discovered that this would be a good thing for all of us. Anyway, no, that's just my opinion.
But this what is it? The phrase is spring ahead, fall back. Yeah. So in spring you change the clocks ahead 1 hour, so you lose an hour's sleep theoretically. Yeah. And in the fall you fall back 1 hour, so you gain an hour's sleep.
This is a trivia question.
Okay.
Let's imagine there's 100 points to lose.
This is Stefan's show.
Yes.
Every trivia question.
So there we go. Where is it coming from? This idea? Is it A, the English? Is it B, the French from France? Is it C, the German, or none of the above? Which would you choose?
The time change?
Yes.
That's an interesting question.
I'm going to guess none of the above.
Who would it be then?
I have no idea.
Okay, he says D. And you, Mark?
I have no idea.
I'm
going to say English.
Always the English. No, not this time. You both lose all your points. It's the Germans. If you need to blame somebody, it's the Germans.
Okay.
Absolutely. Long time ago. I got the notes right here. I'd have to read them again. But the First World War, they're the first one to do it, closely followed by France, Royaume-Uni.
Okay, so this was something that happened in the war. I know what the Germans wanted to get a head start on an attack. They said, we'll attack at 4 a.m. And so the French were ready, but the Germans attacked at 3 a.m.
That's what they call alternative reality. Okay. Yes. No, the real thing was that there was a war effort, and the Germans says, well, if we can change that time, we'll have 1 less hour of electricity to produce in the plants for our workers. This way, we're going to save a lot of coal at the time, because everything was produced by coal. But we're a long way from there now, so it's time to say goodbye.
So they're they want to phase out coal, thank goodness.
Yes. I was talking about the time.
Yeah.
Not the coal. Coal is a good thing, right? But only my opinion.
I used to get it at Christmas in your sock.
That's true.
You're a bad boy, you get a lump of coal.
Did you ever get that? No. You heard about that, right? No.
Not a chance. But that's interesting. So the Germans introduced this whole thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And everybody else caught on, because I guess everybody else was using coal at the time and said...
France followed eventually everybody, but then in 1942 or 43 they said no, we're done with that one until 72 when there was the oil embargo. And then they said, well, it may be a good idea to go back to this. We'll save some energy. Now they're just shedding it away.
I wonder if there was an actual saving of energy. I really wonder. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that some kind of study financed by the government said so.
I always thought it had to do with the farmers in the morning. Like, I had no idea it was about energy.
I'm sure the government said it's good for the farmers, too.
No, I kind of thought that same thing, too.
You
too. It was something to do, because Canada, back in the day was more agricultural, around certainly up to the Second World War. Canada was a very agricultural society. So the idea of spring ahead, for example, is you get up early in the morning to get out and harvest when it's still fairly cool and you're not getting baked by the sun, kind of thing, And you quit earlier in the afternoon, so you're also not getting baked by the sun, kind of thing, I guess. I don't know, but that was what I thought.
My question is, how's it going to work between, like, let's say provinces that aren't changing times and provinces that are?
Well, it's less of a problem, would you imagine? East-west and north-south. North-south, you've got, I'm sorry to say, a lot of economic ties between Canada and the United States. They're very, very deep. Yeah. Interprovincial, east-west, there are big problems, big breaks between. You can't do as much trading sometimes as you should. So, yeah, it is a concern to say, well, but you know, Saskatchewan has always been on a different time, and everybody gets used to the fact.
And on that note, we'll have to say goodbye for today. So for Stéphane and for Vincenzo and for Pierre-Luc in the control room and Marc-André in the control room and Commander Dutil, I'm Mark Montgomery. Take care until next time. Bye-bye.